Welcome to this episode of Incite Your Month. It's our monthly collection of recommendations from our curiosity diet. And as always, I have Harish with me. Harish, to kick this episode off, we'll pick our insightful book of the month. And curiously, this time the pick is a book called Seeing What Others Don't. It's a book about insight. And one of the most basic insights I had while reading this book was we tend to overuse the word insight a lot. When we talk to someone, we say, oh, that was very insightful. If someone sends us an email, we say, oh, thank you very much for that insightful comment. And this book by Gary Klein really helped me understand what insight is, and also the fact that it happens very rarely. We should give the word insight a lot more respect. Maybe we should use it a lot less. And what I really liked about the book, it's a difficult topic really to talk about. And Gary Klein, in fact, makes multiple disclaimers. He says that this research was hard to do, and you understand the conditions under which insight happens, but you may not be able to recreate it each time. So that's what the book was about. I found it fairly useful for anyone who wants to understand how innovation and creativity happens.
Gary Klein has definitely made a few appearances in our curiosity diet. I'm not sure if he's already appeared on our inside recommendations, but Gary Klein is definitely one of our favorites. So I
Yeah,
think we can take his word as gospel.
yeah, the father of the pre-mortem, and actually had a very interesting collaboration with Daniel Kahneman. They're actually on two sides of the debate around psychology. That's for a different day. One thing I wanted to caution our viewers is that this book is a little difficult to read in parts, but it's got some very fascinating stories that you may not have read in other places. So, for that reason alone, pick this book up. So, from that, let's go to our article pick for this month. What is it, Harish?
This is actually an edition of another newsletter by Ria Shroff Desai, who is the lead of people and culture at Bloom Ventures. And she runs a newsletter called Culture Shots. And this particular edition was based on her experiments on disrupting the hiring process and improving the UX for candidates, as she says. She's done a bit of hiring over the last few months, and this is based on all the experiments that they ran. Couple of things that stood out for me. One was have the difficult conversations first. Talk about the salary range as early as possible so that you're aligned. You know that, yeah, this is something which is going to actually progress, and then it makes sense to take the candidate to the senior leaders whose time is precious. You don't want to do the entire process and then say, oh, salary is not working, so I'm not going to go ahead with this. It's a waste of time for everyone. The second was help people be at their best for different rounds of interviews. So actually go and tell them that, see, this is what is expected of you. She says, if we want people to give their best shot, why not actually help them be prepared for that rather than throw them in the deep end? Why create such a stressful experience? These were two great insights that I picked up from that particular edition. That's a pick for the article.
Yeah, so less of an interrogation, more of a conversation is how
Yes.
I sort of took away from that. So from that, let's go on to our pick of Smartcast for the month. So Harish, what have you chosen for us?
Yeah, so this is an episode with Joe Templin. He's written a book called Everyday Excellence, and that's like the embodiment of the compounding philosophy that we talk about. So it's very close to heart. I spoke to him about the art and science of building habits, the role of emotions in building habits, and he's actually tried to apply this on himself. He has a background in learning martial arts. A lot of that has come from there. He's also a financial planner, so he also imbibes that compounding philosophy from there. One interesting thing that I found, and he was talking about his running career, right? So he's part of a running group where the number of miles that you run in the year is the same as the year that you are in. This year, everyone has to run 22 miles. What they do is when you sign up for it, they actually send you the so-called trophy that you would have won when you complete 22 miles. And now it's a question of, okay, you've already got your prize that you are gunning for. Now you just have to finish those 22 miles. If not, you have to make the effort of actually sending that plaque, or I think they have a watch or something like that. So that's clearly very painful. They've used the whole idea of loss aversion very nicely, and I thought that was a very great example of actually putting these cognitive biases that we know so much about to actually build habits and routines. And the rest of the podcast is also quite interesting. A very bubbly person, talks very nicely. So I would definitely recommend Joe Templin.
That's a good entry point into our pick for podcast of the month. This is someone called Morgan Housel, now a household name for many people who've read or picked up a copy of his bestseller, The Psychology of Money. And he appears on the Tim Ferriss Show. We picked that episode thanks to a recommendation from one of our colleagues, Rishabh. So Rishabh said this is like a TLDR of psychology of money, though this is actually a 2 hour plus long conversation. I think the biggest thing for a lot of people is from the book and from Morgan Housel's writing is that we're used to thinking about money and finance and planning as very system two oriented activities full of numbers, full of a lot of hard headed mind oriented decisions. But what he reminds us is that it's all really about emotion. In fact, there's this nice line that I thought was like a punch dialogue. Money is not spreadsheets, it's dopamine, and it's all really about emotion. And he brings those worlds of psychology and money, which is traditionally seen as system one and system two, together. And this is a conversation that talks not just about money, but also talks about Housel's writing and reading. He writes some excellent blog posts. He's been a regular on our compounds curation that we do for our daily reader subscribers. And so this is a very interesting episode that I think a lot of our viewers will enjoy listening to. So from that, let's go on to our smart lever. A smart lever is a short episode on one idea, one mental model that we think will be very useful to our listeners. Of late, we've been focusing on the world of culture. Co-founder Sirisha has been speaking about that to Harish. So, Harish, what's the pick for smart lever of the month?
And again, very strong interconnection with the rest of our picks in this episode. This smart lever is on what we call as culture debt. Debt again in the world of finance is very well understood. A lot of people from engineering background will know about technical debt because you start putting together an MVP and suddenly you have explosive growth, and then you realize that this MVP is not going to work for this because you would have put together something hacked some way around, but that is not something which is going to work for these 5x number of users. So technical people, product people, engineers intuitively get the technical debt. Culture debt is something which a lot of people who have not had the experience of actually having worked or having created a company, created an org culture, don't intuitively get this. So the idea of culture debt is similar to other forms of debt, basically where you are borrowing from your future. That is what any kind of debt is. So companies, when they are growing, you're always going to take some decisions with very immediate short-term goals in mind. You know that some of them are compromises, but you say that I'm going to wing it. Let's get to the point where I have a product and MVP, and then we'll figure things out. And before you know, you get to the point of no return. So how do you actually identify how you are accruing this culture debt? And when do you actually address this? That's what we talk about in this Smart Liver episode with Sirisha. So that's about culture debt. So all of our picks in this episode are interrelated.
Yeah, so I think all goes back to our mission of enabling people to continuously build future relevance and borrowing from the future, something that we sometimes do without thinking, and the role of, I think, everything from emotion to all the other topics that like compounding that we spoke about. I think they all come together in this episode. So on that note, I think it's time to bid goodbye to everyone for this episode. We'll see you next month with another collection of interesting recommendations from Choose to Think. Until then, see you.